So the Atlanta Hawks made some really nice moves during the offseason to retool their roster towards competing in an ever-growing Eastern Conference. But as we know, your team can only go as far as your best player can take you. And in today's video, we're going to address Trae Young and why next season is going to be a very important year when it comes to the progression and development of Trae Young as a basketball player. But before we get started with this video, make sure you drop a like down below. Let's try to aim for at least 1,000 likes. I know you guys can do it. Thank you for all the support that you guys have been showing. Hit that subscribe button as well as push the bell for post notifications. Also, make sure you check out the Overtime Pod. We just uploaded some clips on the second channel. We talked about the Lakers and Montrezl Harrell joining them, along with their other signings. And we also talked about the Charlotte Hornets and them drafting LaMelo Ball. Check it out. A card should be on the screen as well as the link in the description box. And without further ado, let's discuss the Atlanta Hawks and Trae Young and why I believe that Trae Young has a lot to prove in 2021. The Atlanta Hawks underachieved, to say the least, as far as it came to the 2020 NBA season. Coming into the year, many people believed they were one of the up-and-coming young teams in the league, with additions such as Cam Reddish and DeAndre Hunter to the roster, along with other players that were already there that showed progression, such as players like Kevin Huerter, John Collins, and Trae Young. Obviously, many people thought they could even be a sleeper pick to make the playoffs at a lower seed in the Eastern Conference. But as the season progressed, their flaws started to show heavily. The additions of Jabari Parker and Jeff Teague were a complete bust, especially Jabari Parker. He couldn't defend a fly, and even offensively, he didn't even look that good, especially when you factor in that he was smoking layups and he can't space the floor at the power forward position. He was essentially useless. And then you look at their young players. I like DeAndre Hunter. At the end of the season, he definitely caught fire as a 3-and-D player, but he can only do so much. It's not like he's going out there and creating his own shot. Maybe those things will come with time, but he was heavily dependent on the playmaking of Trae Young. And then you look at Cam Reddish, who many people thought was a steal coming into the draft. I was never too high on him. I don't think he looked that good at Kentucky, and he proved my point, as in the beginning of the season and even in the middle of the season, outside of the ending down the stretch of the year, he was just completely abysmal, taking bad shots and wasn't efficient whatsoever. The only saving grace about him is that he is pretty long, but due to his length, he does have some type of promise, at least on the defensive side of the ball. And like I said earlier, at least down the stretch of the year, he was improving, but that's not saying much because you can only go up from how bad Cam Reddish was and how down he was towards the beginning of the season. But the lows only got lower for the Atlanta Hawks because when you add in injuries to Kevin Huerter and a suspension to John Collins, it just completely ruined all expectations that this team had. Offensively, they struggled due to not having other shot creators outside of Trae Young, or at least people that could create their own shot consistently. And even though when John Collins came back, he was still putting up his numbers, but it wasn't like it had any effect whatsoever on the team's win and loss column, so it really didn't even matter. As far as I'm concerned, this Atlanta Hawks supporting cast was a huge disappointment, and it blows my mind that a lot of people didn't talk about it. The only shining spot for this team was obviously Trae Young's progression as a player. This past season, he put up averages of nearly 30 points per contest along with 9 assists and 4 rebounds, while shooting 44% from the field, 36% from behind the arc, along with 86% shooting at the charity stripe. Though defensively, Trae Young was abysmal and was arguably the worst defender of all time statistically, especially when you look at his on and off numbers, but offensively, he gave them everything he could possibly give. The guy had so much gravity towards him, and it's a shame that a lot of the other players outside of DeAndre Hunter, especially at the end of the season, just couldn't capitalize off of it. I'll definitely give John Collins his props, but like I said, a lot of these guys cannot create their own shot. John Collins is really just a roll man and a pop guy. DeAndre Hunter was a spot up shooter for them. Cam Reddish was just straight up awful. Kevin Huerter was in and out of the lineup due to injuries, and when they got Clint Capella, he had yet to play a single game for them when the bubble started. So yeah, offensively, Trae Young really didn't have that much help, but the Atlanta Hawks addressed a lot of those issues this offseason. They went to get some shot creators such as Danilo Gallinari and Bogdan Bogdanovic, and when you look at the fact that they didn't really have a backup point guard, they went out and signed Rajon Rondo, probably overpaid him a little bit too much to some people's standards, but in my opinion, I definitely like the move, especially considering that if the Hawks make the playoffs, you know you're going to get an elevated version of him, playoff Rondo I should say, and when you consider the fact that that team is very young, having veterans like Gallinari and Rajon Rondo in particular, they can definitely bring some veteran presence to that locker room, and Rondo can bring some of that championship pedigree that can hopefully rub off on some of the young players on that team, in particular Cam Reddish, John Collins, and DeAndre Hunter. And when you look at John Collins to be specific, he doesn't have to be a rim protector for this team because Clint Capella, in my opinion, is one of the more underrated defenders at the center position. Sure, he's not going out there and switching on pick and rolls and guarding perimeter players, but if you're just simply asking him to do drop back coverage similar to Brook Lopez or Rudy Gobert, then I definitely think that he can more than fill that role. People forget that just a couple of years ago, he averaged 17 points and 13 rebounds along with 2 blocks while shooting 65% from the field. And we all know most of that was off of easy layups, putbacks, and some lobs. And sure, it isn't Chris Paul and James Harden throwing him lobs, but when you got Rondo, Bogdan, and Trae Young who have the abilities to play make, and in the case of Rondo and Trae, have some of the best vision in the entire NBA, it's definitely possible for him to replicate that same level of offensive production. But using Capella to transition into another one of their frontcourt players that they got this offseason, it is Onyeka Okongwu, because I'm not too high on them picking him up with the 6th overall pick. Because even though I do like him, he definitely gives them some depth in the front court. He's somebody that I definitely believe can have an impact on a team sooner rather than later, especially due to his potential on the defensive side of the ball, and he is undersized, so maybe the plan is to play him at the power forward as a backup to John Collins. But if he's going to play the center eventually, because I think that's going to be his natural position in the league, then why did you get Clint Capella last year and then draft him this year? Are they eventually going to trade Clint Capella in the future? I don't know, because Onyeka also shows promise as a jump shooter, and that's far more valuable than anything that Capella gives you, because even though Capella's a good rim protector, he's not an elite one, and offensively he's very limited. So as far as them drafting Onyeka, I'm not too high on that signing. But a signing that I am high on is the signing of Chris Dunn. Not only did they get him cheap at 2 years, $10 million, but he provides them so much defensive versatility, and though offensively he can be a bit inconsistent, he is still a somewhat decent playmaker, and I'm so angry the Bulls let him go because he is so versatile on the defensive side of the ball. He should have made an all-defensive team last year in my personal opinion, but because the Bulls are so bad on the defensive side of the ball, a lot of people probably just don't know how good he is when it comes to his defense. He has the ability to guard 1 through 3, and yes, I know he's not that tall, but that's just how good he is. I'm talking somebody like Marcus Smart. Chris Dunn can be that in the future sooner rather than later, and the Hawks got a really good pickup for this roster that definitely needs defense in their backcourt. Now, I will say, outside of the Chris Dunn signing, I don't think they did this team any favors on the defensive side of the ball when it comes to their starting lineup, at least. Because when you pay Gallinari $20 million a year, you're definitely paying him to start, I would think. So you're gonna have to either put him at the small forward or power forward. I would hope he's not playing the 2, we all know that. And if that's the case, then that means if you're putting him at the 3, you're gonna have Trae Young, John Collins, Gallo on the court at the same time, and I don't know how I feel about that defense. That is a horrible defensive trio, but maybe the Hawks just looked at it and said, fuck it, let's just go all out on offense, because Trae Young's defense is abysmal, which leads into my final point and the point of me making this video. Trae Young, over the last season, a lot of people looked at him and said he is one of the up and coming young players in the league, but now he's entering year 3, and some people may think it's too early, but it's time for his numbers to start translating into wins. He averaged 30 points per game last year. 30 points. And sure, he's not Luka. Not many in NBA history are Luka Doncic. But for the rest of his career, Luka and him are intertwined forever. Because that trade, say what you want, people are going to look back on it years in the future and address, was this the right decision for the Hawks to essentially pass on Luka Doncic and take Trae Young instead? And when you got Luka who's putting up monster numbers, but unlike Trae Young, his numbers are translating to wins, that doesn't make the Hawks or Trae Young look good because they passed on a player that can instantly affect the win and loss column, unlike Trae Young. At least so far from what Trae has shown us, he can't do that because his defense is so bad that with all that high usage, he can be really effective on the offensive end. But he's so bad on defense, he's literally giving up that much production to the other team on that side of the ball, and you just can't win with that when you don't have a collection of elite talent on the defensive side of the ball around him. For example, look at Isaiah Thomas in 2017. The Celtics literally had to sacrifice their offense with role players on the defensive side of the ball, I should say, around him. Avery Bradley, Jay Crowder, Al Horford. Those guys are defensive-minded players, and in the case of Horford, he's a little bit more on the offensive side of the ball, but it's not like he was going out there and creating his own shot. They were very dependent on IT for offense, and we've seen this from multiple players in the past who are just so bad on the defensive side of the ball that you essentially have to sacrifice your offense in order for them to be fully effective and let them just have high usage. Allen Iverson is another guy that comes to mind, primarily in that 2001 season with guys like Eric Snow and Dikembe Mutombo. So you guys, I hope you're getting my point here. If that's the future that Trae Young is looking towards, then he's not going to ever win a championship as the best player, and even as your second best player, I still don't know how effective he can be. Because that kind of a liability on the defensive side of the ball, it's almost impossible to win with a guy like that on your roster when he has such a major role. But hey, maybe Trae can prove me wrong next year, because if he's as good as a lot of people say he is, then this roster should be good enough for him to not only make the playoffs, but for him to be a competitive team in the Eastern Conference. I'm talking a 4th to 5th seed. If Trae is on that level that a lot of people say he is, I will repeat again, there is no reason for him to not only be a playoff team, but to be a competitive playoff team. I'm talking a team that can at least get past the first round, if not have a competitive series in the first round. And if that's not the case, and they end up just as bad as they were last year, back in the lottery, or they even missed the playoffs, then yeah, that's not a good sign whatsoever. In the future of Trae Young, I'ma just say it like this: he's not going to be a winner whatsoever. And I'm sorry to all the fans of Trae, but that's just the reality. We've seen it from so many players that are just that great offensively, but they can't make up for their lack of size, and you have to essentially sacrifice your entire offense just to build around them. But that's my opinion, you guys. Let me know your opinions down below in the comment section about Trae Young and this Atlanta Hawks roster in 2021. Do you think they're going to be a competitive team in the East? Let me know your opinions down below. Hit that subscribe button as well as push the bell. Check out the links down below in the description box. This is your boy Young Mustard signing out. Peace.